What are your views on the issue of non-payment by vendors?
Non-payment by vendors is becoming a big problem. So what is the problem? The problem is that the person who's receiving the supply ends up paying to the vendor both the tax and the consideration. The vendor defaults on payment, and adding insult to injury, the recipient is given a double brunt. One, he has paid the entire thing including the consideration to the vendor, and secondly, he's been denied the input tax credit by the GST authorities, and that is what we have challenged in different courts.
What are the major grounds for recipients taken by you before courts?
Input tax credit is my vested right. It is a statutory right which is given to me. So any denial of this credit which is beyond my control is subject to the constitutional challenge, and any provision which would debar such a credit to me will have to test the constitutional validity. Secondly, we must understand that it is the responsibility of the vendor to pay the tax. And if the vendor is not paying the tax on time, I can take only reasonable care with respect to the vendors, but it must not lead to a situation of double whammy where I am hit not only for the credit denial but also the amounts which I have already paid to them. Lastly, we must understand that the Indian Constitution, Article 300 capital A of the Indian Constitution comes into play. Credit is nothing but my property, and I have all the right to defend my property as per the provisions of Article 300 capital of the Indian Constitution. For better guidance, one must read our decision in the case of brand equity, wherein Delhi High Court specifically goes into what are these vested rights with respect to credit. Of course, this decision was for transitional credits, but will help the viewers.
How important is it to address the issue related to bad debts?
I think bad debt issue is basically a mirror image of the situation which we just spoke. And why I say that is, let's understand the global perspective on bad debts. Whenever there are bad debts, the aspect from the perspective of service provider comes into play. The service provider in the Indian situation also is required to pay the tax at the time of raising the invoice. But it may happen that he is not receiving the payment for that invoice raised. In that situation, what happens is he's out of pocket with respect to the tax payments. He has paid the tax to the government exchequer, but he has not received the money from his customer. Internationally, what happens is the credit, the proportionate credit with respect to bad debts is given by way of a recredit to the supplier. Now, this is a mirror image of the other situation wherein the vendor payments are not happening. But I think both goes hand in hand. The right solution would be to address both the issues so that the tax compliances become a better way to deal with.
What is the way forward in light of recent decisions?
See, most of these decisions are fact-based, and what we have been arguing before the court is based on the facts and circumstances of each case. This recent decision, even of the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court says that it is not the right moment for the court to interfere, is actually tilting that most of these cases will have to be argued based on facts and circumstances. What precautions and reasonable care the recipient of the service has taken or done, and what is the reason for the default on the side of the vendor, why that default has happened, and basis these facts and circumstances, the court will interfere. What we also understand is that in most of these cases where the matters are coming, the audits or the investigations are going on, and hence writ tool would be the right remedy in most of the cases so that the courts can decide basis the facts and the circumstances whether the benefit of this has to be curtailed or not.